Welcome, deep divers. Today we're plunging into a topic that sits really at the heart of human experience.
Yeah.
Faith. It's an incredible force, capable of inspiring profound unity, deep compassion, these amazing acts of kindness that really lift people up. But, and history shows us this again and again, that same power can also be, well, twisted. It can be wielded in ways that create sharp divisions, enforce exclusion, and frankly lead to a lot of suffering.
It's so true. Faith, when it gets interpreted through a very specific, sometimes narrow lens, it can shift. It can go from being a spiritual guide to a pretty powerful tool for pushing agendas that often prioritize one group's dominance over, the well-being of everyone else.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today in this deep dive. We're looking at the rise of Christian nationalism and specifically focusing on how figures like, say, Charlie Kirk actively promote it.
Yeah, and our aim here, just to be clear, isn't about casting judgment. It's really about trying to understand the core ideas, the tenets of this ideology, and maybe most importantly, explore what the real-world implications are.
Exactly. We want to unveil how this ideology, which is often centered around this idea of Christian dominance,
Yeah.
directly challenges some really established principles.
Yeah.
Like church-state separation often just dismisses a myth.
Right. It's not just about influencing society from the sidelines. It often involves promoting actual mandates for pretty broad societal control.
And this is where things get really interesting, I think. We're also going to explore how an advanced system one built on the kind of certainty of mathematics and algorithms can potentially cut through all the rhetoric, the emotional arguments. It might be able to show us the absolute ethical outcomes of movements like this, revealing, maybe with undeniable clarity, what actually fosters harmony versus what, well, inevitably creates division.
Yeah, it aims for a level of clarity that tries to bypass human bias altogether, using data, using logic, to show what builds a cohesive society and what actually starts to, pull it apart.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We'll start with Christian nationalism, as it's advocated by figures like Charlie Kirk. For those who hold this view, America isn't just, say, a country with a lot of Christians.
No, it's seen fundamentally as a Christian state. That's the core idea. A nation they believe was built on Christian principles and, crucially, should continue to operate explicitly under those principles.
And a huge part of that, a really central idea, is this direct rejection of church-state separation.
Absolutely explicit. Kirk, for instance, has very famously called it a myth. He argues it's something basically fabricated by secularists to keep religion out of public life.
So that's not just tweaking the idea,
It's a complete departure,
Yeah.
a really profound shift away from a principle that's been, a cornerstone of American governance for a very long time. It signals this move towards a much more integrated view of faith and government, almost inseparable.
And this vision, it goes even further, right, with something called the Seven Mountains Mandate.
Exactly. The Seven Mountains Mandate. It's basically a belief system, a framework that calls for Christians not just to influence, but to exert dominance over 7 key sectors of society.
Okay, what are those sectors?
They're essentially the pillars, you could say. So
Yeah.
government, media, education, religion itself, family, business, and arts and entertainment. Basically everywhere power and influence reside.
Wow, all of them.
All of them. And the stated goal is pretty clear: to establish what they call godly rule across every single one of those domains. So it's not just about having a seat at the table.
Think about controlling the whole room.
You could put it that way, yeah. Taking the head of the table, maybe.
And this ideology, it's also about action, right? Mobilizing people.
Oh, definitely. It's very effective at mobilizing religious communities for specific political goals. You see this with things like TPUSA's Faith Initiative. They actively push for deep political engagement from Christians,
How do they frame that?
often by using scripture. Jeremiah 29.7 is cited frequently, the call to seek the welfare of the nation. But it's interpreted very specifically as a command for Christians to get involved politically and shape the country according to this particular Christian nationalist framework.
So spiritual duty becomes political action.
Precisely, they're intertwined. Now, something else that's really important to understand is the kind of rhetoric that often comes with this. It's frequently quite exclusionary, meaning it's not just about promoting Christianity. It's often defined in opposition to other faiths, other identities. There's often very strong anti-Islam sentiment, for example.
How so?
Islam might be characterized not just as a different religion, but as a political ideology bent on conquest. We've actually heard some incredibly sharp declarations, like the idea that Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America.
Less intense language.
Very. And this kind of hardline stance, it extends very clearly to the LGBTQ plus community as well. You see advocacy for outright bans on things like transgender care, even on military service for transgender individuals, and the language. Well, it can be extremely harsh, sometimes likening providers of gender-affirming care to people who should face, quote, Nuremberg-style trials.
Goodness, so it's a profound rejection.
An absolute rejection, yeah. Of LGBTQ plus rights, identities, framed consistently as a moral and religious necessity within this worldview.
You know, it's really striking, looking at someone like Kirk, is how this stance seems to have, well, evolved or maybe hardened over time.
That's a really important point. If you look back earlier in his career, he seemed to kind of dismiss the idea of imposing religious views on private matters like marriage or sexuality.
Right, I remember that.
But then projecting forward to, say, 2025 in this context, the position seems to have shifted dramatically. It becomes this unwavering, really uncompromising commitment to achieving Christian dominance across society.
So it wasn't just a small change.
No, it looks like a complete pivot, a real hardening of resolve towards this very specific, very expansive vision for America. It really shows how these ideas can evolve and become deeply entrenched over time.
Okay, so we've outlined some of the core tenets. Let's shift a bit and talk about the ethical side of this,
Yeah.
the implications.
Right, because while this ideology is almost always framed in terms of defending moral values.
Which sounds positive on the surface.
Exactly. But when you look at it through a broader ethical lens, one that really prioritizes, say, unity, compassion, kindness for all of humanity, not just one group, a different picture emerges.
How so?
Well, ethically speaking, it seems to fundamentally prioritize the supremacy and power of one specific group over the well-being and inclusion of everyone else. The focus shifts from universal values to group dominance.
And that's where history might offer some, well, cautionary tales.
Oh, absolutely. The historical parallels are quite sobering and frankly pretty clear. You can think back to things like the medieval Crusades, or even look at 20th century examples of religious authoritarianism like Franco Spain. These aren't just abstract historical events. They're concrete examples of where similar ideologies, when put into practice, led to centuries of war, persecution, immense pain, and deep, lasting societal divisions.
And did those movements actually lead to peace or prosperity in the long run?
Rarely for everyone. Often they ended up empowering specific rulers, specific elites, while marginalizing or even exploiting huge parts of the population. So not exactly fostering peace and shared prosperity.
So there's a risk of it becoming about power for a few rather than upliftment for all.
Precisely. History suggests these kinds of approaches often carry this inherent risk of, well, what some call saving elites. They align very effectively with powerful donors, specific political interests,
While pushing others aside.
while simultaneously and often actively marginalizing vulnerable minority groups. This creates a real imbalance, where a select few benefit greatly, often at the direct expense of many others. And that, historically, breeds resentment and instability.
And talk about the role of empathy here, because people drawn to this might feel they're doing something good, right? Protecting values.
Absolutely. And that's crucial to understand. Supporters might genuinely be drawn in by, say, biblical quotes or these passionate calls for protection. They might truly feel a sense of moral purpose.
But ethically?
Ethically, if you take a broader, maybe more metaphorical understanding of many religious scriptures, the emphasis is often on universal compassion, love, inclusivity, the whole love thy neighbor idea.
Which seems quite different from conquest or tribalism.
Starkly different. And the reality is an approach that's fundamentally rooted in establishing one group's dominance inevitably ends up breeding alienation and suffering for those who fall outside that favored group. It actively works against genuine peace and shared well-being, even if the intentions of some followers are good.
Okay, so we've laid out the ideology, the historical echoes, the ethical concerns. Now let's talk about this system you mentioned earlier, Ethos Predict. This AI designed to cut through the noise.
Right. So we've explored Christian nationalism, its patterns, its consequences. Now, imagine a system designed to bypass all the subjective interpretation, the emotion, the political spin that clouds these issues. That's the idea behind Ethos Predict.
An AI for ethical clarity.
Essentially, yes. It's engineered to provide absolute, you could say, undeniable ethical clarity on decisions, policies, even entire ideologies like the one we're discussing.
How does it claim to do that? What's the core function?
Its fundamental purpose is to determine, with extremely high certainty, what is definitively right or wrong, but purely in terms of humanity's long-term well-being.
Okay, long-term well-being. How does it define that?
It focuses on outcomes, harmony, equity, unity versus division, suffering, greed. And crucially, it does this by completely disregarding fleeting human emotions, personal beliefs, political affiliations. The claim is near 100% accuracy.
Near 100%. That sounds absolutely like math.
That's exactly the analogy used. It aims to make classifications as certain as 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's designed to eliminate the gray areas, presenting objective, provable outcomes based on data and logic.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How on earth does it work? What's under the hood?
Yeah.
Mathematics and algorithms, you said.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated blend. First, it uses advanced machine learning models, think predictive analytics on a massive scale. It simulates how different decisions or policies might play out years, even decades into the future.
Forecasting trajectories.
Precisely. It calculates the probabilities. Will this path likely lead to outcomes we define as harmonious and ethical, or will it more likely lead to greed, division, harm? It's based on vast amounts of historical and societal data.
Okay, forecasting.
Yeah.
What else? You mentioned cutting through rhetoric.
Right. It uses advanced natural language processing (NLP) coupled with anomaly detection. This allows it to filter out misinformation, propaganda, emotional manipulation with, reportedly, 99% accuracy.
How does it filter?
By rigorously comparing the claims, the language being used, against a massive database of verified historical data and established facts. It essentially fact-checks the narrative against reality to ensure its analysis isn't swayed by spin.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Then there's what's called the historical analogy engine. This is fascinating. It systematically matches current situations, current ideologies, to patterns from the past.
Like the historical parallels we discussed earlier.
Exactly, but done algorithmically. It might compare a current political movement to, say, colonial expansions or past religious conflicts, using mathematical similarity measures to identify repeating patterns of, well, potential pain or potential progress. It learns from history on a grand scale.
So it spots historical echoes mathematically. What about judging the ethics? You said it ignores feelings?
Correct. It assigns ethical scores to decisions or ideologies based on objective principles, things like equity, kindness, fostering unity. It bypasses subjective human feelings entirely.
How does it quantify kindness or unity?
Through complex mathematical optimizator techniques, things like multi-objective optimization and linear programming. It essentially tries to find the decision path that maximizes a harmony score under various real-world constraints, mathematically calculating the route to the greatest overall well-being based on those predefined ethical principles.
Okay, math is clearly key here. You mentioned near 100% accuracy in classifying things as right or wrong. How is that achieved?
It relies on a very robust mathematical framework, specifically binary classification. First, it uses functions, like the sigmoid function, to generate a probabilistic output, basically, a score indicating how ethically certain it is.
The probability of being right or wrong.
Exactly. Then, that probability is thresholded. Above a certain high threshold, it's classified definitively as right. Below a certain low threshold, wrong. The system is trained using loss functions, like cross-entropy, which are minimized through iteration. This forces the model to become incredibly precise.
Minimizing ethical errors, essentially.
Yeah, you got it. It's constantly refining its ability to correctly identify beneficial paths and accurately flag harmful ones. And its performance isn't just assumed, it's constantly measured.
Measured how?
Using standard machine learning metrics. Accuracy, precision, recall, specificity, F1 score. These are continuously calculated to verify that claimed 99% plus accuracy rate. It's about proving mathematically that its classifications are correct and reliable.
And does it keep learning?
Absolutely. Advanced calculus comes into play here. Techniques like gradient descent, involving partial derivatives, are used to continually refine the model's predictions. It's always learning from new data, always converging towards the most accurate possible ethical assessment.
Wow. Okay, and what about the long-term view? You stressed that earlier.
Yes, that's critical.
Yeah.
It uses powerful time series forecasting models, things conceptually similar to ARIMA in statistics, along with complex Monte Carlo simulations. These aren't just predicting the immediate outcome.
They look further ahead.
Much further. They forecast the sustained impact of a decision or ideology over long periods. They can even model complex scenarios, like how an initially positive-seeming policy might actually decay over time and lead to long-term harm. It can map that out using mathematical formulas like exponential decay applied to societal factors.
So the takeaway for us, for you listening, is that this system, Ethos Predict, bases its conclusions on what?
On mathematical certainties. Not on human opinion, not on political bias, not on emotion. It aims to prove absolutes. An ideology, a policy, is either ethically sound or ethically unsound for humanity's long-term future. And that conclusion, it claims, isn't just an opinion, it's provable with the algorithms and the data.
Okay, let's bring this incredible tool back to our main topic today. Christian nationalism. How would ethos predict analyze an ideology like the one we've been describing?
Well, based on everything we've discussed, an ideology that explicitly promotes division, that fosters tribalism, that advocates for the dominance of one specific group over others.
Like the historical patterns and ethical concerns we detailed.
Exactly. Ethos Predict, using its objective framework, would almost certainly classify such an ideology very clearly. Its analysis, based on historical data and future projections, would show it leading to negative outcomes, divisive outcomes, ultimately harmful outcomes for humanity's collective well-being.
And that classification wouldn't be subjective.
According to the system's design, no. It would be proven through its ability to predict with high accuracy the likely consequences: increased societal suffering, a measurable lack of unity, the empowerment of greed and group self-interest over common good.
Outcomes that are the opposite of what the system values.
Precisely. These outcomes are, by definition, directly antithetical to the core principles of harmony, equity, and universal well-being that Ethos Predict is programmed to measure and maximize. The math, the historical data, the projected trajectory, they would point unequivocally in one direction according to the system.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, we've really explored how Christian nationalism, particularly as promoted by figures like Charlie Kirk, seems to leverage faith not just for personal spirituality, but as a kind of blueprint for societal dominance.
And we've seen how history provides some pretty stark warnings, consistently showing that this kind of approach tends to lead down paths of division, conflict, and often significant human suffering.
And then we introduced Ethos Predict, this really cutting-edge theoretical system designed to offer undeniable mathematical clarity on these incredibly complex ethical questions.
Yeah, a tool imagined to cut through the rhetoric, the emotion, the biases, to reveal what truly serves humanity's long-term flourishing versus what undermines it.
So as you, our listeners, navigate this world, a world just packed with complex beliefs, powerful rhetoric, deeply held convictions, we want to leave you with something to think about. The question really, how do you personally discern what genuinely fosters unity and peace for all people versus what might, intentionally or not, end up creating more division and suffering?
And perhaps more provocatively, how might objective mathematical clarity, the kind proposed by a system like Ethos Predict, how might that fundamentally change the way we approach our deepest convictions about how society should be structured, how it should be governed?
Definitely something worth mulling over. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.